When this slightly strange person offers friendship so readily to Helen and is so enthusiastic about spending time with her, there is something quite seductive about that for Helen, because she has found that hard in her life.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview, where our guest today is Katherine Faulkner. I loved her debut novel, Greenwich Park, and it's a Book Reporter Bets on selection for 2022. I had the pleasure of hearing her talk about this book at a preview event that they did for booksellers in the fall that I snuck into. And it intrigued me right from the beginning. It was like one of those thrillers. You just knew, she gave away just enough to get me to pick up and want to read. So I snagged it right away. And as I started, I was reading it everywhere. I was carrying it with me. It was one of those books where didn't want to work. I want to do this. You got a newsletter, but I really wanted to read all these things, including I carried it in when I was taking a bath and I dropped it into the bathtub. So I have many like wet still pages a week later. It just shows galleys take a while to dry if you drop them. I've learned. So I was just close to the end, but the good part was the parts I hadn't read stayed dry. So I was able to go finish the book. And believe me, I was racing to do it because I couldn't wait to see how it ended. And oh, what an ending we have, and we're not spoiling it. So welcome, Katherine. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad you actually managed to finish my book, given, your disaster in the bath. And I'm glad that the right half of the book stayed dry for you.
There were just that many pages. I was so excited. And you really did get me excited about it, hearing you talk at one of the select events. I was like, this is one I've got to pick up. So let's start and catch the audience up by you telling us about Greenwich Park.
Sure. So Greenwich Park is the story of Helen, who is apparently she has the perfect life. She has a beautiful house in a gorgeous neighborhood in London. She has a seemingly perfect husband, and she is pregnant with her first child. But her perfect life starts to unravel quite spectacularly as the result of a friendship that she makes with an unpredictable fellow mother at her first prenatal class. And this friendship quickly goes in a strange direction. Helen's unsettled by Rachel's odd behavior some of the times they meet up, but she finds it increasingly difficult to distance herself from Rachel. And it quickly becomes clear that Rachel, in fact, has an ulterior motive for seeking out Helen's friendship, and she is connected to Helen and those close to her's shared past, and actually has knowledge of a dark secret which threatens to destroy Helen's life.
And what would have been very interesting is if her husband had come to that first prenatal class, what might have happened or not. And by the fact that he stayed away, like what ended up happening. And the perfect setup was he was too busy to come that night and he was too busy to join her. And there was the perfect thing that happened. So every book's got the catalyst for an idea. There's this moment where you sit there and go, I got the story. This is your first novel. So what was the catalyst for this one?
Well, so I'd been playing around for a while with this idea of how do you unmake a friendship, and I'm really interested in female friendship. I find it so fascinating and complicated, and I love all the kind of twists of these relationships you have in your life, which can be very, very powerful and very, very important to us as women. And I was fascinated by the idea of what happens if you meet somebody and you make friends with them. It's very easy to make a friendship, but how do you then distance yourself if you actually think this person is not good news? It's actually very, very difficult. And it's a situation I had kind of found myself in at my old job. And I was just kind of fascinated by, what could the consequences of that be if you took it to a real extreme and you realize somebody was not in your life for the right reasons, or they didn't want your friendship for the right reasons. So I kind of already had that idea. But then when I was also pregnant at the time when I was having this idea for the book, and then I went to my first prenatal class, or antenatal class as we call them in England, and I was sitting there with all these strange couples and in this strange scenario, and it just hit me like, this is the weirdest situation I've ever been in. Like, I have to be friends with these people. I have to share intimate details of my life with them. And the expectation was we're all going to swap numbers, we're all going to be friends forever, and you'll never get rid of these people. And I thought, this is it. And I did have a bit of a light bulb moment then. I was like, this is it. This is the setting for that story. This is going to be how my two characters meet. And then I just had so much fun with it.
Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, what's your due date? Oh, this. And everybody starts comparing. And I mean, look, I haven't had my youngest one is turning 27 this week, and I can still go into a deep sweat thinking about what it was like. And it was really nice because for the second child, he didn't have to go because you know what's going on. But usually for the first one, everybody's in this area of expertise of like, they know just so much, and this area of expectation and fear. So you have that same whole level of emotion happening in the room. And it's like, let's be friends. And you're like, I'm not so sure.
It's such a difficult time. It's such a difficult moment. Like all your friends who have children are like, oh, you know nothing, just wait, and now you know why they say that, but it's not kind of helpful to you, and then the other people in the class are all like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to have a natural birth, there's going to be whale music, and this and that, and it's very intense, very, very intense. And I think it's a really particular moment, and I do think it's quite it struck a chord with people, just like that scenario that these two characters find themselves in that opening scene. And actually, as I was telling you before, I'm just bombarded with people like sliding into my DMs with the weirdest stories of antenatal classes now, and just telling me all about how this like freaky thing happened in their prenatal group. So it's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah, it really is, because you don't really see a lot of these people like afterwards, but you're wondering like who had the baby the same day, who was doing the same thing, because you were like in this moment, you usually all do about the same time. And then you're looking at everybody who looks bigger than you do, who looks really great still, like all these, and it's this first moment of judging that you start doing as you have a child. And it's just like one of those things, who's walking first, who's crawling first, and you just have to get yourself out of that scenario, but they've trapped you in this moment that you're all together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think Helen just struggles with social situations like that, and where there's any kind of pressure to make friends. It's not something she's good at. So for her, this is, even though, of course she lives a privileged life, she doesn't have any real problems at the start of the story, but she experiences her life to be very challenging, because she finds it really difficult to make that leap socially, to talk to strange people. She's already in a situation she finds really intimidating, the idea of suddenly having to make friends. And so when this slightly strange person offers friendship so readily to Helen and is so enthusiastic about spending time with her, there is something quite seductive about that for Helen, because she has found that hard in her life. So I think, and also she does have the feeling something's not quite right about Rachel, but she's not super confident in her own judgments and in her own impulses. So she's constantly questioning herself. And when people like her husband say, well, she just came over to the house and like offered you a coffee, like what's the problem? It's not that weird that she turned up on the doorstep. Like, I think that's just what women do, isn't it? They just go around to each other's houses for cups of tea, like it's fine. And so she's like, oh yeah, maybe it is fine that she keeps turning up at my house, and maybe it's not weird. And so and that's kind of how she gets drawn in. And then when by the time she realizes there is something really wrong here, she's in too deep.
She's in way too deep. I also love that when she goes into the class, she puts on name tags on the seats, because her sister-in-law, who's also pregnant, is supposed to be joining her with her husband. So she's got her place, her husband's place, her sister-in-law's place. And then this woman, Rachel, walks in and she goes, is anyone sitting here? And she's sort of dumbfounded, like, of course they are. Those are going to be the three people that are going to sit around me. And then she's like, no, I guess not. And she realizes her husband's not coming. The others aren't coming. And now, oh, okay, yeah, you can sit there. And you just see the tension that's building inside of her. But then she's like, well, but then at least I don't have to be here by myself, because Daniel's left me here all alone. I'm very, very upset, So, okay, any of the people are there anything that really happened in your antenatal class that ends up on these pages? Anything there? I mean, like, really? Can you still see these people on the street and be okay?
It's really funny though, when the kind of the story, the book, kind of the blurb that you have on the back of the book, when that came out, the kind of summary of the story, one of them did screenshot it and send it to the group, which, to be fair, had been dormant for some time, and was like, what is this? And then I started getting private messages being like, is this what I think it's about? Like, is this about what I think it's about? Is this the person? And I was like, no. I mean, obviously, like, I did take some things from the intensity of that experience, like, for sure. Even down to the room in the pub in Greenwich. My antenatal classes weren't in Greenwich because that's not where I live, but the kind of hot room above a pub, that's where my classes were, in a pub room like that. And it was hot because my baby was born in August, and yeah, it was just a hot summer and I was fed up and very, very hot and pregnant. I think quite a lot of that went into the thing.
It's like, okay, that's there.
Really
that's there. But that's all that's there. It's just the hot room. It doesn't have anything to do with the rest of you. We were all warm, right? Like, you'll remember.
Yeah,
you'll remember.
It was just the hot room. It was nothing to do with that weird girl who turned up and started making awkward comments.
She went away, right? Like, we don't have to see her anymore.
If there was somebody at our antenatal classes that made a weird comment, it was definitely me, because actually I'm Rachel. Because the course leader was, and this was a stupid exercise in my defense, but she was like getting out these items, and she said, these are items that are going to help you in labor, and you had to guess why each one would help. And she brought out this really horrible brown outfit for a baby, and we were all really confused as to how this would help us in labor. And she was like, well, this is the outfit that you're going to dress your baby in, and if you have it with you in labor, it's going to really motivate you and make you really just want to push. And like, I don't know why I did that banging sound, obviously inappropriate, but she was like, yeah, it's going to make you really want to push and like get your baby out. And I just made a comment like, because I thought it was just some prop she'd picked up from like a charity shop or something. So I just said, oh God, I don't know if that outfit would make me particularly motivated. And then she was just like that, and then she was like, that was my baby's first outfit. Yeah. So, if anyone was awkward in that room, yeah.
And then your husband just going, I don't believe you just said that.
Why have you said that we're supposed to be making friends with these people? Oh my God.
I remember they kept giving us exercises to do, and my husband's like, we got it the first time, we're not going to do it 10 more times. Like, we figured it out already. So he wasn't any help. And then he's an engineer, and he's like, no, I think it could work better this other way. And I'm just sitting there like, let's just follow the class so we can get out of here. Like, we just want to the goal is to leave. It's not to improve upon the class. We don't need to be doing that. Look at this 32 years later, I remember these things. It's like one of those things that
quite formative.
Right? Yes,
you don't
exactly.
forget, like, especially the men, I think it's really emblazoned on their brains. And like, I mean, I'm impressed your husband didn't just sit there in total silence with his arms folded, because I think that's what mine did, like pretty much all of the other men there.
I think he was more afraid of what I was going to say. Like, when they were going around the room and they're like, what is everybody afraid of? And I was going to say the other mothers, and he says, you can't say that. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll be quiet.
On some level, I think that is the real answer. And I think that is why Greenwich Park has struck a chord with people.
It's like these, okay, we're all going to preschool together. Woof, this is going to be really rough.
I know.
So we're looking at the subject of toxic relationships, which is the idea of getting together with people that you're later going to have to detangle from. And this is what she ends up doing, is she's now found this woman. The woman made her feel very comfortable that first night in the class. And then she shows up with coffee, and she shows up with a story, and she shows up with this, and she can't figure out how to get away from her. So was there something that was like the impetus, like, of, oh my gosh, this untangling is not going to work? Or was it just imagination of, this is where we go from here?
I think I'm just fascinated by the idea of female friendships, and when they kind of go wrong or when they go toxic, and sometimes really healthy, happy friendships can go wrong. I think female friendship is just very fraught and very complex. And as your life changes, those very, very close relationships that sometimes you share with people in a particular moment, actually they don't work for the rest of your life, and things, moving parts move around, and then they don't work anymore, and then that can feel really traumatic. And equally, sometimes I think you can meet people and think you have a connection with them, and then actually find yourself wanting to pull away from them because something feels wrong, or it doesn't feel like a healthy relationship. I've just always been fascinated by those dynamics, I guess. So I wanted to really kind of take it to the extreme. So the interesting thing, I guess, about the relationship in the early stages between Rachel and Helen is that then they should have plenty in common, and maybe the differences between them shouldn't be such a big deal. But because Helen lives in such a privileged world, Rachel is very disruptive, even without doing very much. So even just going along to a part, even before she starts really ramping it up, she, just by turning up to a dinner party of Helen's and saying the wrong thing, it's kind of a huge trauma for Helen, and she's thinking, oh my God, this woman is ruining my life. I can't get rid of her, And I think we've all kind of felt that about or had that experience of having someone that you just think, I just wish, I just can't get rid of them, but maybe we're too polite, we don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I just kind of wanted to see how much that could actually push you psychologically if you really couldn't get rid of somebody, and then maybe suddenly, oh, they're living in your house, and when you take, and then you realize they know things about your past, and actually they've been looking at your things, and how far could I take it? And I just had a lot of fun with that.
They're wearing your clothes, they're using your hairbrush, they're just touching all your things, and that's
all
not
the
really
things
nice.
that just slightly drive you mad, and each individual thing is like fine, but actually cumulatively, and when you're pregnant and you have all these other pressures, and there's a lot going on for Helen by the kind of middle of the book, I think actually it's just kind of very, very low level psychological warfare for her, even before she finds out what Rachel really wants.
And she had lost a baby before that, if I remember correctly, too. So she's sort of on tenterhooks. Like, she's also nervous just about the fact of having a baby. She doesn't need any drama layered in. And her husband's working these ridiculous hours, and what's going on with him? Why isn't he around for her more? And we're going to get into what else is going on at the house, because that's a whole other crazy thing. You open the book with an afterword. And was that always from the beginning, or how did you reconstruct, that was that written later?
It was written later, yes, and I did reconstruct. I think for me, I'm not a huge planner actually, although I do love the plotting. But for me, it comes. I say as this expert who's written literally 2 books, but for me it comes later naturally. Like, wouldn't find it fun to write a book if I'd plotted every single thing. So I kind of started with Greenwich Park with this idea of these 2 women and coming together in this moment, and seeing how that unfolded and ratcheting up the tension bit by bit, with this woman just wanting to get closer and closer into Helen's life, and kind of went from there. And then, but then about halfway through is when I kind of had a better idea of where it was all going. I thought, okay, so now I'm going to really plot how this is going to unfold and this is going to end. And then it's at that point that I think it was quite late in the book that I figured out exactly how the ending was going to go. And that's when I thought, actually, the letter's going to work, because that's how I'm going to kind of tie the ending to the beginning. So I think actually I opened with and it originally was just opening with the scene in the antenatal class. But I think I did always kind of know that I wanted to do something else, but I didn't know quite. I don't think I could have written it at the beginning.
Yeah, you didn't know exactly where the story was going to go. It's like, oh, wait, it got ramped up. It's, and also once women find out they're pregnant, their lives are measured according to weeks, not months. And everybody goes, oh, you're 6 months pregnant. But if you're a woman, you're 24 weeks or whatever it is, because you're counting every down to 40. You can also do math. You can say you're halfway there, 1/3 there, anything you can do to try to move the process along. So you've also got the book in weeks. So we're at 24 weeks, we're at 25 weeks with what's going on. What made you decide to do the week structure? Because it so works with what the woman is going through. It's like, ticking down the box.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I can take 0 credit for it actually, because I wrote part of this novel on a novel writing course, which I did when I was on my maternity leave, and I had this amazing tutor, Sarah May, who is a novelist herself, and she sort of mentored me through the writing of Greenwich Park. And one of the things we actually struggled with was passage of time, because obviously she's becoming more pregnant, but how do you, so I knew I kind of needed to timestamp things in some way, and we played around with different ideas. And she said, but when you're pregnant, you think of your whole life in weeks, as number of weeks. And so we realized actually that's just perfect, and actually I do think it works really well, that kind of ticking clock, and you're getting towards this denouement of when she's due to have the baby,
and you're going to get to 40 but then sometimes the baby's not here yet. And you're like, oh, wait a second, you said 40. You said 40. Why do I have to go to 41?
So I was like, yeah, there was a lot of my experience with my first daughter went into that, because I got to 42 weeks and 2 days, which is incredible. And I don't even think they let you do that now, and that was only 4 years ago. But I was just, and I left the WhatsApp groups I was in. I was so fed up. I've never been in such a bad mood. Like, I was just not even replying to people. People were like, where's this baby? And I'm like, I think I would tell you if it was here. Like, honestly, there's nothing I can do. This baby does not want to move. She just would not come. And oh my God, I was so frustrated. I could have just screamed.
Well, my second one was late, and he's late every day since. But it was really funny because we went out and they said, oh, we'll just have the baby. We'll just, we have the baby on Wednesday. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really great. So we went out and had large Mexican food dinner, all my favorite foods on Sunday night. And I got home and went into labor, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to go well. It was like, yes, kick the tortilla, blah, blah, blah. This is not good. But it was really funny because every woman can remember, whether it's happy, whether it happens on time, early, late, or whatever, there's always some kind of trauma involved in the whole thing. Either way.
It's so weird. And you spend the rest of your life talking about those few weeks. And that must be because it is such a formative and strange and memorable experience, the whole thing, and all the like funny little things that happened around that week or when you were waiting for the baby. You just remember them all. And so, yeah, I think there's just an intensity and a vividness about that time, even in your memory now, and which I find it a really interesting point for a woman, because you're in this such a strange place psychologically, especially your first baby. You have no idea what to expect, really. Like, you think maybe you do, but you don't. And everyone tells you got no idea, and and you're going to turn, and it's like this threshold you're about to cross from like your baby being not here to hit. I mean, it's actually hard to actually get your head around. And at the same time, you're thinking, but what about the person I left behind? Like, am I going to go back to that person, or have I changed it to a new thing now? And I don't know, I found it so bizarre and such a kind of mind-blowing thing, not necessarily in a positive way, to be completely honest with you. And I found that something I definitely just wanted to explore with the book, and really drill into what that moment is like, and what would it be like if you're also dealing with a kind of threat to your entire life
at the same time.
At the same time, because that's fun to throw in too.
Well, and also, were you planning to go back to your job, or you had started writing the book? Had you planned to go back to your job as a reporter?
Yeah, and actually, funnily enough, I took some time out because the book was, was getting a lot of excitement over here. And so I took some time out when it was published here, and I used that time to write my second book and to really focus on that. Interestingly, though, I didn't find it, I found it kind of unhelpful to just be writing. Like, my job as a journalist is so great for inspiration and creativity. I get so many ideas from being at work. So I've actually gone back to work part-time, and I'm finding it really helpful to be back in the newsroom. I just love it. And I love the energy of it. I love the contact I have with interesting people, interesting stories, and being a reporter particularly was, which I'm an editor now, but I was a reporter for many years, and just experiencing the full gamut of human experience up close and being close to people at these intense moments in their life. I mean, I can't imagine a better, for somebody who's interested in storytelling, it just fired my imagination so much, and so much of that has gone into my books. So yeah, it's definitely been good for me to have that as a kind of extra strand to my life, rather than just, I kind of just think I just found actually sitting in my house and just trying to think things up in lockdown was actually quite hard compared to the madness of trying to juggle it with a real life.
You said to your second child, could you give me a plot line, please? Please, something. Yeah, exactly. Give me something, please. Give me something. I need something to go down on the page.
I had the second baby, and I was like, this is going to be fine. This is going to be like the first time when I wrote a book on my maternity leave. No, it turns out it's quite a lot harder the second time when you have a toddler running around. Yes, that didn't really work out. Hence the time I
didn't exactly go the right way. No,
I didn't get that memo.
No, mine are 5 years apart, and somebody says, "Oh, why?" And I said, "I wanted somebody to be able to get in the car seat by themselves. Somebody had to be able to be like on their own. It couldn't just be me. I need
I wish I had had this conversation with you like 3 years ago, but whatever, it's done now.
Sundown, the sundown, da da da. But okay, so then we've got Helen and Selena are sisters-in-law. So they've got like there's a little tension between them as they've all been friends for years, but now everybody's pregnant, and Selena's sort of got this, come day, come day, go day kind of attitude, whereas Helen is terrified of what's going on. And then we layer in another woman named Katie, and we go to all their points of view. So tell us a little bit more about Selena and tell us a little bit more about Katie, so we get how they all work into the story.
Yeah, so Helen has two brothers. She's closest to her older brother, Rory, and he's married to this very beautiful woman, Serena, and they all went to university together. So she knows Serena, and she's always, ever since Rory started going out with Serena at university, she's just kind of idolized her. And Serena is sort of everything Helen's not. She's super confident. She's socially dexterous. She just effortlessly makes friends with other women. Other women gravitate to her. She's beautiful. She's poised, she's kind of person for the Instagram age. She's creative and rich and lives a kind of carefree life in Greenwich, which Helen kind of thinks that should be her. That should be the way that she lives her life. She should be relaxing, going to yoga classes, having some kind of creative outlet, posting photographs about it. She just can't really do, she's not really that kind of person. She's not really that, she's not confident, and she also lacks that kind of social network, which she feels Serena has. So Serena is a source of quite a lot of anxiety to Helen. I don't think Helen would contextualize it that way in her own mind. She would say, Serena is my beloved sister-in-law. I love her. And she's excited to be pregnant at the same time as Serena, and she thinks it's going to bring them closer together. And so Helen's the kind of person that imagines everything in her head of how it's going to be, and is always disappointed by the reality. So she's like plotting this maternity leave they're going to have in Greenwich together, where they're going to meet up for coffees all the time. And it kind of, as her pregnancy goes on, Serena's always too busy to see her, and it's a source of sadness to her. And then she also has Katie, who's her closest friend, who Helen's closest friend, and she's a childhood friend. She's known the family a long time. And Katie is, again, very different to Helen. She's very grounded. She's a journalist. She has her own career. She's not reliant on she's single. She's not reliant on a kind of husband. She has a very clear identity of her own. She has kind of terrible taste in men, but nobody's perfect. And she's on a kind of on-off relationship with Helen's younger brother, Charlie, who is the kind of black sheep of the family. But Katie is determined to find out what Rachel's really up to. And so she's a very useful character in that sense. But she's a good grounding influence on Helen, and somebody Helen can actually rely on, and who sees Helen's kind of ridiculous characteristics but kind of loves her anyway and has her best interests at heart. So it's through Katie's kind of tireless investigating of what is actually really going on in Helen's life that we finally get to the truth.
So Katherine, am I doing anything here? Katie is the most like
weirdly, I didn't even think of that, but of course, a lot of when I was writing it, I was like, I just didn't make that connection. But obviously I've just never been a Katie. But no, I love Katie as a character, and she is, I'd like to think I do have better taste in men, but a lot of me and my career has certainly gone into her. She's a bit more, I probably, sadly nowadays, I'm probably more of a Helen character, aren't I, because I've got these two kids and I'm always too tired to do anything. But whereas Katie's quite cool, she still quite likes going to parties. Maybe Katie's my fantasy of myself.
Katie's like, wait a second, she solves the world. It's like,
yeah, she's
like the superwoman of the book. Yeah, there we go.
I think she's got a great job.
She doesn't have anybody crawling around her legs. She doesn't have anybody asking for a bottle. That's it. Look, she's your girl. Really, really great.
Yeah, she's just got a cat. Very simple.
Very, very simple. Very, very simple. Was there ever talk about having any of the men in the book give their points of view? Like, because they don't get their points of view told. It's told
they don't. No, it's not. It's interestingly, when I first wrote the book, I did write from their point of view, but so I had Daniel's chapters and Rory's chapters, and I think maybe even Charlie. But the decision was made at quite an early stage of the editing that it was too cluttered like that, and it was too much hard work for the reader flipping between all these narratives. And actually, when we really got to the heart of what this story was and what this story was about, it was about female friendships, the dynamics between women. So that's why the decision was made to kind of strip it down to the women's narratives and stay close to them and their experiences and their lives. And the only woman who's a key character in the book who doesn't have her own voice, of course, in the first person, is Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of a piece with the ending and the way that it ultimately unfolds, that Rachel hasn't had her voice.
Yes, Rachel hasn't had her voice for a very big reason. It's and at one point, Helen just wants Daniel to tell her what to do to get rid of Rachel. Like, just tell me what to do. And she seems like he's supposed to be logical. Like, he is supposed to be the logical person. He's supposed to tell her what to do, which later is doubted. Was it interesting to write her as so rudderless, just let her be unraveling? Because she really is. As the more time goes on, it's like, just somebody tell me what to do. And Selena's not going to tell her what to do because she really couldn't care about her in a lot of ways. She wants to be better than she is. And that's like, you go do your thing. Was it really like you're taking her down to like every single chapter where she's unraveling more?
Yeah, I think on some level, although she's not kind of brave enough to quite articulate it to herself, Helen knows something's quite amiss in her relationship with Daniel. And she's hoping that it's just the pressure of work, or maybe the fact that they're both worried about this pregnancy because they've been through a terrible tragedies before. So she's really kind of not wanting to rock the boat / wanting to kind of defer to what he wants to do. And so the whole them dealing with the Rachel situation together is very much in that context. And also she feels responsible for Rachel and responsible for bringing Rachel into their lives. And so, yeah, she's just exhausted. And then I think sometimes we forget you're just exhausted, and it's difficult to kind of deal with a big confrontational social situation. I mean, it's the sort of thing that when you're in that position, you're about to have a baby, you don't want it. You don't want to deal with it. You just want to put that off until you've got over this huge thing that you have to do, right? That's going to be life-changing. So I think she is really looking to Daniel to help her to solve this problem, and he doesn't necessarily come to her aid. So so it's a big problem for Helen, and of course that all comes to a head.
Yeah. It just all percolates, like, this, that, the other thing. She also doesn't have parents to turn to. And I think that's like a really big deal because she doesn't have anybody to call, and she lost them in a tragic way. So as a result, and you don't learn that right at the beginning of the book, you just know she doesn't have parents. And then I guess you're really about 2/3 of the way through before you realize what happened. And her mother had been a little crazy. And I think she's starting to wonder, is she a little bit like that as well? So that's going through her head as well. And I think the anxiety ratcheted up even more. And when I saw no parents, I was like, oh, wait a second. She really has nobody to turn to. She can't go back to the people at work and say, hey, let me just tell you what's going on in my life right now. It's all completely changed. So I think when I got to that part, I felt like there's another hurdle that she had to get over.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for her, the loss of her parents was very significant because she is a very sort of home-loving, family-orientated person. She sees herself, because she's the sister between these two brothers, she feels like she's the anchor. She's the one who's gone back to the family home, tried to make it a home again, tried to keep the family together, tried to stop her two brothers from arguing. She's kind of family is important to her, and she's lost, her parents, which is terribly traumatic for her. And you're right about her mother. So her mother was experiencing mental illness. And I think for Helen, that really doesn't help having that kind of knowledge in the mix. And there is a real, and I think being pregnant obviously brings up a lot of stuff about your parents, the way you were parented, how you want to do things perhaps differently, or perhaps you're looking for that guidance from your parents as to, what do I do? And she doesn't have them to turn to. And she's also got this nagging anxiety in the back of her mind about her mother's mental illness. And after the loss of her pregnancy, she herself was very depressed, and so she's worried that same thing is going to happen to her that happened to her mother. So yeah, all of that is hugely anxiety provoking for Helen, and contributes to her state of mind.
Yeah. And, there's also this other thing that's going on is that this house is now under construction. So they're living through this construction project where they're renovating all different parts of the house seemingly at the same time. And she can't stand the noise, so she doesn't want to be in the house. And it's messy. And to do a construction project at any time is horrible. But to be doing this at the same time you're constructing the baby makes it worse. So was that always a layer that the house was going to be under construction too?
Yeah, it was for me. It's something that I really struggle with myself is having people in my house. And I think for her, it's adding to that between the builders and Rachel, it's really ratcheting up this sense with Helen that she feels invaded. But the funny thing about all of these things are ostensibly nice things. And that's why I think it's I found it interesting to play with this idea that Helen, she's so privileged. And so, she feels she can't complain about these things. I can't complain about my husband who has a great job working overtime because he's trying to provide for me and the baby. I can't complain about the renovation of my house because it's something we chose to do and actually it's going to look beautiful and I'm so lucky to have this beautiful house, so I can't moan about it. I can't complain about this woman from a prenatal class who she wants to be friends with me too much. And when she rationalizes it to herself, she feels she is not entitled to push back against these things because she knows she's a privileged person and these are things that she should enjoy and appreciate. And so she doesn't really know or have the kind of emotional lexicon to say to understand why she's feeling so under threat and invaded. By the time she kind of finds it in herself to push back, it's almost a bit too late.
Yeah, it's way too late because everything is just getting worse. The construction noise is worse, and then all of a sudden she notices it's not happening. Why is it not happening? Where did they go? It's not
making any progress, exactly, and that is just the most frustrating. And then again, she's thinking, well, maybe that's normal, but maybe it's not, and maybe I'm just hormonal and it's affecting me too much because I'm pregnant and I'm tired. And she's going through these cycles and cycles of self-doubt all the time.
Well, I know you were describing the bathtub at one point, and it was a British expression to describe the bathtub. So I was looking it up and I'm like, okay, what does the bathtub look like? Let me look at what the bathtub looks like. And I love that because there were a number of Britishisms in the book. And I just loved it because I would just find myself Googling, oh, what does she mean here? And I loved it because
that's so funny because I think they left quite a lot of my Britishisms in. I didn't actually object to any of the kind of changes they made for the American version, except one, which was that they tried to turn my biscuits into cookies. I wasn't having that. No, they're not the same thing.
They're not the same thing. They're not.
Nobody in England would be like, do you want a cookie? It's a biscuit. Do you want a biscuit? Yeah.
It's going to definitely go. So
but the Britishisms thing is funny because my editor was just like, some of your expressions are hilarious. And I didn't even know they were Britishisms. Like saving something for best. I think Helen has some plates that she saves for best or something.
Yes.
Saving for best.
Great line. No, but it definitely infused the flavor of the book because you are in this place, and to have it be completely Americanized wasn't going to work. I mean, it just wasn't. No cookies, biscuits, definitely. Now, some of the pages are written or printed, and they're not written in italic. They're printed, and they're about Greenwich Park. And why did you have those? Are they giving us some more of the story that nobody can tell, or what are we doing there?
Yeah, so I think that I don't really know. I don't know how I ended up writing them, but I think I want to show the reader there's a glimpse of something here that's happening behind the scenes that you don't know the whole picture about, but I'm going to show you later, I guess is what I was doing there. And that there's another side to this perfect neighborhood. There's something going on here that happens at night that's secret, and you're going to find out more about it later, I guess.
Yeah. Good luck to you folks. So how long did it take? Okay, so you tried to write the first draft while you were on maternity leave. About how long did that take to do just the first draft?
It was probably a year, and that was quite quick, I guess. But I really, once I got going, I really couldn't stop writing it. And so I did write it, I think, in a year, but then I left it a long time and came back to it and was horrified and rewrote quite a lot of it. And then tried to polish it probably over another good few months before I sent it out to agents. And then it was kind of crazy from then, because, you know, I had a lot of interest in it, which was incredible. And then I did an edit with my agent. And then when when it went to auction, which was hugely exciting, then I had this incredible process where you got to sit down with different publishing houses and different editors and hear their ideas for the book and how they would take it forward and market it. And I in the UK, and I went with Bloomsbury, and then I had that process in America. And I was very privileged to have interest from Simon and Schuster, and I knew straight away I wanted them to be my publishers. So so then there was an editorial process after that as well, where each editor wants to put their stamp on it, which is obviously great, and all of that I'm sure has made it the book it is today, and shaped it into a satisfying read so I'm thrilled. The whole thing's just been so exciting.
It's really well fun. Well, in the acknowledgements, I also see your Canadian editor is Nita Pronovost, who wrote the book, The Maid, under the name of Nita, and I interviewed her last week. So I said, I am so glad I'm reading these notes at the end, because it's all coming together now of, And
I'm so glad I got to meet her. She came to the UK, and actually we had a coffee before COVID, which was incredible. So I'm so glad that we got to do that. And yeah, she's amazing. She's had so many ideas for the book.
But it was just so funny. I was like, wait a second, this is all together. So they got two debut novelists at the same time, but she's also my editor. And she was also writing what's going on. It was like completely fun to sit there and see this. And she, I take it, had already probably done her book at the same time she was editing yours, but it's just like this collision of all these people. And I think you share the same agent. I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, but maybe we do. But yeah, no, for sure. When I read her book, I could see why she connected with Greenwich Park. I think we have quite a lot of the same sort of interests and preoccupations. It's incredible, The Maid.
It was just so much fun to sit there and see that. And so then you spent this number of years as a reporter, going undercover as an investigative journalist on top of everything else. And when you talked about you wrote so fast, do you think that one of the things is you're so used to writing on deadlines? Like, just sit down and, like, if they say to you, write some about the book copy for this book, you just sit down and do it. And Linwood Barkley, who's an author that we work a lot with, he'll sit there and he'll say, well, there's no such thing as plumber's block or teacher's block. There can't be writer's block. Just sit down and write the words. And do you feel that way when you're sitting down and writing? It's just go get it down, and then we'll play around with the details too.
That's a hard one, because I think a year ago I would have said yes, but COVID really threw me creatively, and I did find it hard. I think as a journalist, yes, I have that discipline, and I'm very deadlines driven. And I think the best thing about being a journalist is that you're not precious about being edited. You understand the process of editing, actually, and no book is a good book in the first draft. It's just, I think it's impossible. Like, it's a process of building it from that point. And so I think I was very signed up to that being a very helpful process and a very necessary process. And understanding what an editor meant when they said you need to make these changes, and taking that away and kind of rebuilding it as a book. So I think that helped, and that experience definitely helped. But yeah, definitely writing is not something that's scary. I guess I have that muscle memory, and I'm used to writing every day. And when I did have the childcare and the time, it wasn't like I would sit there staring at the wall. I would get on with it, and I would write, and not always as well as other days, but of course, I did do it, and it wasn't scary to me. But I think bizarrely, I pushed myself too far that way with my second book. And I think probably because of COVID a bit, I had this like maternity leave with my second daughter, and my time was so precious. I was like, right, when I sit down, I just need to write something. And I think I probably did rush it a bit. And I think maybe I do need to probably be a little bit more, spend a bit more time in my head, actually, before I put the words to the page. But yeah, it's
during COVID days, it was just do something, like, just believe, if I could just put something down on the page, if I could just make dinner tonight. We had this joke that was going, and we were doing these Bocacino live things that we do. And I told you at the beginning, like every month. And we were saying that people only cared about books coming 4 weeks out, because really you were only thinking about dinner tonight. You weren't worrying about the weekend. Like, what are you going to do on the weekend? Oh, that's so far away, and it's Thursday. Like, it's just, the days just seem
so overwhelming. Yeah.
Forever.
I can't believe that, that how long that all took as well. Because I think when we were in that first lockdown, we were like, this will be a few weeks. And Yeah, what a year, what a couple of years.
I have a friend in publishing who's very funny. And she says, I thought we were going home for 2 weeks so they could clean the office. I left all my shoes there. I have like no shoes. They're all under the desk and they're not letting me back in, even though the office is supposedly now clean. So why? And it was just the funniest thing. And most people, when they went back, were most delighted to find their shoes that were under their desk because they wore different shoes to commute. So it was just this very funny thing of what like COVID was actually like, especially beginning. And then it just morphed from one thing into the other. As one of my friends says this great line, she says, they were trying to get us to belong to the Lambda, Delta, Omicron sorority. And we were all trying to fight being like, taken into the sorority. And I was like, yep, that's exactly what was going on, I don't know. So tell us about the title. Was this always the title? Was Greenwich Park always it?
To be honest, I couldn't think of a title for it. I liked the title Greenwich Park. I sort of thought it might change, and that an editor would have a much better idea. And that I think my editor in the UK was quite thinking about other titles. But what was funny about this book was that I think because my agent had been kind of whispering about it to people in the industry, people got to hear about Greenwich Park even like at a really early stage. So, and they'd been talking to booksellers a little bit and people had read it in-house and were getting excited about it, which was lovely. And lots of people at my agency who had read it and were shouting about it. And it had got a bit of a life of its own by that point as Greenwich Park. And so I think in the end, Bloomsbury decided, who were my UK publishers, were like, actually, it's Greenwich. That's the name of this book. It's already kind of got a bit of a buzz about it, and people are waiting for it, and people are excited for it. So it stayed as Greenwich Park. So yeah, that was the title I gave it, and that's the title it's ended up with. But yeah, who knew?
Well, here's the nice, pristine, clean copy that hasn't been washed in the bathtub. So this cover. Very different from the UK cover. I don't know if you've got one handy, but very, very different cover. But here we've got the definite, like, beautiful view. And you've got this woman in red in the hallway, in the doorway. And you're just there like, who is she? With a little bit of sinister there. So was this the first cover you saw, or was this after playing around a lot with it?
There was a bit of playing around. She didn't have such this great big crack on her. So it was all a little bit more, it was a bit less sinister, and I think they kind of upped the sinisterness, and I think that was a good move. I liked that it was dark yet kind of vibrant with the green, and I did like that it was a house, and the solidity and the squareness of the book and the house. I liked that a lot. So I liked it straight away, but they kind of really upped the ante with it on the second kind of, they were like, they gave me this cover. They're like, this is the cover. And I was like, great, I love it. And then they were like, actually, this is the cover. And then I thought, oh, okay, yeah. That's really good.
Yeah. And you just picture walking the front door and seeing her on the other side and going, oh no, she's back.
Oh God, there she is.
She's back again. What does she want? Milk, eggs, or living with us? Oh, she wants to live with us. Oh, that's like really great. Yeah, come on in. Not a problem. So this came out a year ago in the spring in the UK. So I think it's last spring. So how long was it to wait? What was it like waiting for the US edition? It's like, oh, I'm waiting for my second baby to be born.
It has been strange, but I think it was, there was a lot going on, and so many people's books got delayed, and it was just, that's totally understandable. And I think it was great that it was picked as a top shelf pick, and they wanted to do it in January. So I'm lucky that a lot of thought and has gone into the campaign, a huge amount of thought from gallery. So I'm very lucky in that respect. So it was a good thing in the end, the lead time. But it was kind of strange because it was this kind of huge, I mean, for me it was a huge thing, obviously seeing my book on a shelf in a bookshop, and that being a real thing. But it's been a really long time to wait for that to happen in America. So I am so excited now. I can't actually believe it's in 5 days time. That's just so crazy. And I have friends in New York and California and all over the US who are just like, can't wait to go and see it in the shops, because they've just been like harassing me for months about when this is actually going to happen. So yeah, I'm very excited.
It was also nice because you could do your press in the UK and not have it on top of doing it in the US.
Yes, that is true. Actually, it would have been quite overwhelming, actually, because I am doing things pretty much every day at the moment for US and Canada, which is exciting. But yeah, I was the same in the UK, so it would have been actually quite tricky, so I'm quite glad in some ways.
Biscuits, cookies.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Okay, so how about the audio? Laura Kerman is the US narrator, and we've actually, right before this, we figured out she is the narrator. Did you have a hand in selecting her for narration in the book?
No, I had no idea. And she's so perfect. I mean, it's such a gripping narration. She makes it something that is I mean, it is my book, but she has made the story her own. She tells it beautifully. I just couldn't be more thrilled with it.
Oh, that's like wonderful. Do you usually listen to audio? Is something that you do, or you more a reader?
I actually do a huge mix. So I actually love reading physical proofs. Like, I'm always annoying people by asking for physical proofs if they want me to read their proofs. But but then I also use my Kindle. In fact, my husband is like, "Can you please just use the Kindle so I can switch the light off, please?" It's just like, I'm just like always reading when he wants to sleep. So and then I also but audio is great for me because I commute, and so yeah, I do that as well. So yeah, I'm just basically a total nerd and I do everything. So
muting is the best part. But look, these are the notes that I actually wrote the night you were talking about the book. So
that's so nice.
The Waterside Go. So I was like writing about this, and it was very funny because later on I said, I know I'm going to need these words. And I was like, oh, these are what she's talking about. This is great. And I had a bunch of folded down pages too, which I always tell listeners, I always fold down, but don't write why I folded down. Like, I don't underline the page, but I can't do that like on a Kindle or anything like that. You'd have to underline the line. And then I go back to that page and try to see why I wanted that page. What was turning me on there? And then after I've read the book, does that still matter? Because sometimes you're underlining something and you're like, oh, I'm going to figure out in 10 pages, and that would be giving away too much. So there we go. So for the next book, because like I'm ready. So
oh, good.
Where are you? About how far are you? Still in manuscript first pass stage, or where are you?
No, so I think we're at that stage. I mean, I have a complete manuscript, but we're still just figuring out final changes. Well, I mean, I hope they're final changes. So I'm very excited to share more about it, but yeah, it's been quite a year, so my editor's quite relaxed about the timeline at the moment, and I think we're in pretty good shape.
But I think it's also nice that something's done. And it's not like you're trying to pick up and start writing something now. So having that extra year between the two editions coming out, it gave you that time to like, oh, let's breathe a little bit. Because if everything happened at the same time, you'd still be doing press while you're trying to write a book. And it's really hard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. It has been such much fun talking to you, swapping stories, hearing your stories. And I am really looking forward to reading what you do next. And I promise I'm not going to drop it in the bathtub next time.
Oh, thank you, Carol. I would appreciate that. No, seriously, thank you for having me so much. I've really had so much fun. And yeah, just so glad you enjoyed the book. And I hope all your listeners do too.
And to our readers, look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.